A recent survey says that 10% of Uber drivers have been assaulted, and 6% of us have been sexually abused in some way while on the job. Let's talk about it. Welcome everyone, Mark here from Uber Hints. What came across the wires this week was disturbing. It's such a downer and so disturbing. I almost didn't want to report on it, but I don't think we can pass it up. I got this one, I've seen it in more than one place, but this one is off The Guardian online. And the headline and subheads read, Uber and other rideshare company drivers ripped off, assaulted, and racially abused. Transport Workers Union survey finds 1 in 10 drivers have been physically assaulted on the job and 6% sexually assaulted. Those are not insignificant numbers. So let's read through this whole thing and see exactly how this took place, how the survey took place, and how this information was accumulated. And then let's find out what we can do about it, and if you think all of this is legitimate, and is it a concern for you? Drivers for Uber and other rideshare companies are being ripped off, assaulted, threatened, and racially abused, a new survey reveals. The survey of 1,100 drivers released on Wednesday says more than 60% reported earning below the hourly $16 rate. I can believe that. Before costs such as fuel, insurance, and car maintenance, less than 16 before those costs. Now, I know I do much better than that. I do better than that after costs. But as you know, I am very careful about how I drive, when I drive. Some hours I don't drive passengers, some hours I only do eats, vice versa. Some hours I don't drive at all. I do other things because I know it just isn't going to be profitable for me. But there are people out there that, hey, this is a work day, they turn on the app at 8 a.m., they shut it off at 6 p.m. or whatever, and whatever happens, happens. So they're probably going to experience lower per hour return than people like myself who kind of cherry pick when we drive. And it goes on to say that there were also 969 reports of harassment and assault. The survey by the Transport Workers Union and the Rideshare Driver Cooperative, I'm not real familiar with them, reported 1 in 10 drivers being physically assaulted on the job, while 6% were sexually assaulted. Those numbers are outrageous. They seem really, really extreme to me. Now, I don't know how scientific the survey was. You know, sometimes I kind of suspect that when people are being activists and when people are trying to make a point, they might exaggerate some, dare I say, lie in the returns. And those skew numbers. So I don't see where they're talking about, you know, what is the margin of error on this, how scientific was the survey. We're not seeing a whole lot of information on that. Now they have a couple of quotes from people who responded. A passenger pinned me into my seat with his body weight while he used his hand to sexually assault me, one respondent said. 37% reported being threatened, while almost a third received racist comments. I can understand the racist comments. I also recognize that what some people perceive as being racist, others may not. We live in a pretty sensitive society. Megyn Kelly, now I'm no fan of Megyn Kelly, but Megyn Kelly is probably going to lose her job over something that I think was pretty innocent. She said that back when she was a kid, people might put on Halloween costumes because they wanted to look like someone, and it didn't have a racial intent. I could see that. You know, I remember even when it was racial, does that mean that it's mean-spirited? You know, I remember when Eddie Murphy, years and years ago on Saturday Night Live, did a thing where he would dressed up like, they put makeup on like he was a white guy and he walked funny and everything. It was funny, you know. As a white guy, I didn't look at that and say, my God, I am so offended. Now, I also understand black people in this country have a far different history than white people, so maybe it's easier for me to let that roll off my back, right? But regardless, my whole point is there is a sensitivity in our country, so take that for what it's worth. I've had drunk passengers call, okay, I'm not even going to use this word, but drunk passengers call me blank and a terrorist, one driver told the survey. And I believe that as well. I know that drunks will say things, and they're things that are degrading and offensive. You've all seen those videos online. Another driver reported the passenger joked about taking me to a remote location to rape me. Those aren't things you joke about. That is not funny. One respondent filed a police report after being held at knife point with the rideshare company failing to deactivate the passenger's account. That is absolutely uncalled for. They deactivate us at the drop of a hat. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily wrong, because you do have a responsibility as a company. If there's a reported incident, you have to respond to that in some way. If that means a temporary deactivation while they're investigating, it's sometimes what we have to live with. But I think it's far harder for a driver to deal with deactivation than a rider. Because if I'm deactivated, it's my lifeblood, right? It's my money. It's my income. It's how I'm going to support my family. It's how I'm going to make that car payment, pay for that gas. If a rider is deactivated, there's other ways to get around. It's not pleasant. It's not a fun thing, particularly if they are wrongly deactivated. But I think it's easier for me as a passenger to deal with being deactivated for 3 or 4 days than it is for me as a driver to deal with being deactivated for 3 or 4 days. People got around before Uber. They'll still get around. There's still buses and trains and feet and cars and friends and taxis. There's still other things they can take if they get deactivated with Uber. If a driver who's driving full-time gets deactivated, it's not like I can turn around tomorrow and get a second job. So that's a little, I'm getting a little off topic here, but when you get deactivated or the passenger doesn't, it's cause for concern. Now, is this an isolated incident or is this the norm? That is important to look at too. Because if it's isolated, okay, sometimes things slip through the cracks. If we see this happening frequently, it's an issue. It needs to be addressed. They're offered no support when they face sexual or physical assault and must choose between taking time off work to recover or going back to work the next day in order to get paid. They're kicked off the app on a whim of the rideshare company and prevented from earning a living. Well, that's true. There doesn't seem to be any standard for removal off the platform, does there? So we're just about at the end of this one. The survey results expose the lie from the federal government. Now, I think that this is the UK, so this might be the British federal government. What people can make a fair wage in the on-demand economy. In reality, what's going on is 18th century exploitive via an app. The survey was conducted between July and October. Respondents, some of whom work for multiple rideshare companies, worked for Uber, 97%, Ola, 46%, Taxify, 26%, Didi, 22%, and others, 15%. Uber, Ola, Taxify, and Didi were contacted for comment. I love the way that they end the story. Uber, Ola, Taxify, and Didi were contacted for comment. Okay, what was their comment? Did they refuse to comment? Did you just have to get the story out and so you went with it and we're going to add more? I think what a crazy way to leave us hanging. Uber was contacted for comment. And that's it. It doesn't say they refused to comment. We're waiting on a reply. It doesn't say anything. What do you think? Do you think these numbers are inflated? Or do you think this really reflects what's happening? If we say 10% of drivers have been assaulted, do you think that it's fair to assume that 10% of rides are assaultive in nature? I mean, those are two completely different things, but it kind of makes sense that there be a correlation from one to the other, doesn't it? If 10% of drivers are being assaulted, it only makes sense that 10% of rides are assaultive rides. So are we assaulted 10% of the time? No. I've never been assaulted. I've got thousands of rides under my belt. So to say 10%, I'm not saying it's a lie. I'm not saying it's wrong. I question it. I question it. Now you could say, well, Mark, that's not true. Not 10% of rides, because as, a male, and I'm not a small guy either, maybe, people would say, you're less likely to get attacked. You're less likely to be assaulted. You're a male. You're less likely to be a target of a sexual assault. Yeah, I'd agree with all that. But still 10%, that's a big number, man. I'd love to hear your comments. What do you think of this survey? You know, I accuse Uber a lot of using the press to manipulate for their advantage in public relations. Could this be the same thing? And I mean, is this a case of what's good for the goose is good for the gander? Or, you know, is this legitimate? Is this padded in order to try to bring Uber to the table, in order to publicly shame and embarrass them? Or are these numbers, do they hold weight? Are they true? Are they consistent? If you just noticed a jump in the video, it's because the doorbell rang and they delivered my box. I've been waiting on this. My camera. My camera has been showing a little spot right about here. And you don't notice it so much when it's a busy pattern like this or the bricks. But if you go, especially on my other channel, the Average Me channel, if you look at anything that's bright, it's been driving me bonkers. It looks like a little spot or a speck was on the lens, but I cleaned it. I had a problem with my camera about a month and a half ago. I sent it in for repairs, and they said they cleaned the whole thing externally and internally, and that little spot, you can go back and look at those videos, and it's right there. It looked like it was a speck of something out of focus. And so I sent it back, and here it is. So if you've been noticing the quality of my videos has looked like the image has declined, or when we're recording dark things, that's why, because I've been doing everything on my phone and not on my Canon G7X Mark II. So I've got that back now. I'm pretty excited. So where was I? I was wrapping things up. I'm going to encourage you to leave your comments down below, like and share the videos. If you haven't already, please subscribe, and please consider supporting this channel and my second channel, the Average Me channel, by becoming a Patreon sponsor. People who sponsor for $3 or more, I send them personal postcards from all the places that I visit. And you know I go all over North America, all over the US and Canada. And that's one way that I say thank you for helping out this channel and making these travels and this time when I could be doing other things and maybe even have another job or out driving, whatever. It makes it possible for me to do this. It'll help a little bit. So you can get that information down below. So thanks for being here, everybody. I'm Mark from Uber Hints.